Like you could be the worst exam scores in Ireland,
Yeah.
and the best exam score in Ireland in your medical school could be up against you for a spot. But if they're in the one pot down from you, you're beating them. Yeah, like after tax on a surgical job, like per month, you're probably looking at like Harry, there's a guy here, his blood pressure is 260 on 220 and his vision is blurred. And then you're like, ooh, that sounds very bad. And then when you're on the way there, they go, yeah, there's a guy having a ST elevation, myocardial infarction over here on the ward. He's very short of breath, heart rate 170.
How you doing, guys? Welcome back to another video. My name is Harry. I'm a second year medical student here at UL. Oh my god! Right, I'm going to start that again, Oscar. Sorry about that. That won't happen a lot, I promise. How you doing, guys? Welcome back to another video. My name is Harry. I'm a second year medical student at UL, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Oscar. He has graduated from our course at UL in 2022, and he's now working in Beaumont Hospital in his intern year. Oscar, what's the crack? How you getting on?
How are you? Thanks for having me on. I'm doing good. I actually wasn't in work today, so I'm doing very good.
You know, happy days. Happy days.
So yeah.
And so obviously this is your kind of kickstart to fame, so just get ready. It's a big channel, but anyway, so we're going to jump straight into questions. I'm going to get through a lot. Just, I guess, to summarize for everyone, I know it'll be in the description, all of the questions that I do ask Oscar, but we're going to be going through a lot of stuff that I think even for myself as a second year, and I know a lot of other people find sometimes the details about when you finish are often kind of not very clear until late in the day. So yeah, excited to ask a lot about this, and I'm hopefully going to find out as much information as everyone else. So jumping straight in, just to kind of get some context, if we can go right back to the start, could you tell us a little bit about kind of how you got into grad med and how you found, if you can at all, summarize your kind of your 4 year study in med? How did you find it?
Yeah. So I obviously it's graduate medicine, so I did an undergrad in medical laboratory science in DIT. And that included a 1 year placement in the hospital labs, and I happened to be placed in Crumlin Hospital. And I always thought of doing medicine before, but that really solidified it for me, because there was some aspects of that job, even though it's 99% in the lab, some of it had a kind of clinical basis where you'd be with patients, and those were always the parts I enjoyed. And I've really solidified that I knew I was interested in the subject matter, and that kind of solidified that I wanted that kind of more patient and kind of on the front line type of day-to-day work. So then I did the GAMSAT when I was in my final year of that, and thankfully did well enough. And yeah, then I actually had UL as my first choice, because I knew the kind of PBL style would suit my learning. So I was happy to get into UL, and yeah.
Unreal. Yeah. And would you say, I was going to say, did you have a favorite year? But I guess like that's probably very hard to say. They're very different, aren't they?
I don't know. It's easy to say. I thought the first and second year, they're like the same year. There's no difference between first and second year. They're both preclinical. They're both PBL twice a week, clinical skills twice a week.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even say the content gets harder. It's just different.
Yeah.
I thought that was so much fun, because it was a new kind of way of learning. Met so many new people, and there was one or two nights out maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we don't talk about those online. It's only the studying that people see,
Oh yeah. Because your medical students have no fun at all. Which, by the way, anyone who's watching this and thinking of doing medicine and thinking you have no life, you can choose to have no life, but you can also choose to kind of work hard and play hard type thing. But it definitely is doable. I'd say in terms of that aspect of it, I probably went out like socializing at least once a week, and also had a job on the weekends, working Saturday and Sunday. So like it don't think you have to put your entire life on hold.
No, it's funny. That's such a good point as well, because I remember asking like you guys at like even just socially or at soccer or whatever it was we were doing during the week, or just the upper years. I remember always looking to the upper years, and like especially when you come in first year and like you do just think like, I remember some people had said to me, "Oh, grad mate, you can be in the books all day every day," and like it very much wasn't the case. Like you say, so long as you can kind of stay on top of things, you really can have a life for the most part. Obviously, bar like maybe exam season gets a bit hectic, but other than that,
It's a bit different in exam season.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I very much be a proponent of like, I think you're almost doing yourself a disservice if you don't incorporate like enjoyable aspects of your life into your time in medicine. I would say overall it like negatively affects you even from a grades point of view, because like if mentally you're in the wrong place, even if you have a book open and even if you're staring at it, like it's probably not going to go in. It's probably not sticking. Like that's my view on it anyway. So I was always kind of like, right, I'll get my work done and then I'll do something I actually want to do, and be that like playing football, be that going out socializing, be that going to work, which I didn't want to do, but anyway.
So true. No, it's so true. So true. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I know we just had our exams as well, and I literally kept soccer going like right up until the Thursday before the exam started on the Monday for that very reason, because I had people messaging just saying like, oh, could we get a game of soccer going or whatever, just to clear the head, because like you say as well, I find that as well, you get to the point where you could be staring at a book for hours and it doesn't matter if you can't have that balance for sure.
Yeah, and I suppose the like anyone who's kind of done an undergrad and thinking of doing medicine, a lot of your studying for undergrad for your exams has been very like, okay, exams are in 2 weeks, like in the library every day, like head down studying. The exams in medicine are more like cumulative knowledge. You know, if you can't cram for like 4 years. Like let's say in final med, you can be asked anything in the entire 4 years. Everything's fair game. So you know, it's not as if you can cram for that. And I remember in my finals of me and a bunch of our class, we actually played soccer the night before one of the big exams. And it was because everyone was just like, you know what, the work is done. If it's not done at this point, you're screwed anyway.
Yeah.
So let's just take the day off or take the night off. Let's just, you know, relax a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's a different approach to, you know, anyone who's done, say, like I remember when I was doing my undergrad, you know, you'd have like like a biochem test in the morning, and you'd be up till like 4 a.m. cramming, and every single thing you read is gone the second you walk out the door.
So true. I remember I did that with I think leaving cert chemistry. I did that. I went to bed for half an hour from that. Like don't know why. Like at that point, you know, the last night I was there going through 50 sets of notes, and like you say, it's before you've started reading the next page, the previous one's gone. Like it's madness. Madness. Like.
Completely.
We're talking about internships, really, largely, I guess. But so the first question is, how do you apply to internships? Explain to someone with kind of like no knowledge of that process. How does that kind of work?
Yeah, so it's a really like tedious and kind of clunky process, but it is kind of spoon fed to you at the same time. When you're in fourth year, when you start in fourth year, you'll be invited. Like the school will send you emails and everything, but you'll be basically invited by the HSE intern network to apply. And there's 2 phases to the application. I think, don't quote me on these exact dates, but it's something like maybe like September of fourth year, or of your final year. If you're an undergrad, it'll just be your final year. You'll apply to stage 1, and that's all kind of like biographical information. It's like talking just about like, you know, it's like filling in your name, date of birth, whatever. And then they go away with that information for a few months, and then eventually advise if you're eligible. Because there's stuff to do with like let's say if you went to school, college, and university in Ireland, school, undergrad, and postgrad in Ireland. It's a matter of filling in your name, but it's a bit more complicated, I think, for like, let's say, people who are applying to the intern network who studied abroad, or who maybe did their secondary school in a different country. These things are a bit more more kind of annoying, but for me
Right.
it was very straightforward. But basically, once you're eligible, as per your kind of biographical information, they'll invite you to stage two. And
Okay.
stage two is basically when you and that starts in, I think, January of your final year. And they'll basically send you a list of the intern jobs that you want to pick. And before this, I sent Harry a big list of every intern job in the country. And basically everybody gets that list. It's a really, really long, massive PDF, basically, or like Excel spreadsheet. It's got like 3,000 cells on it of just like
I'll
job.
I'll actually pull that up briefly if you want to, if that helps to kind of talk through that, because that was, it was really helpful what he or what was pulled up. So I think
so. So basically, the way it works is you're asked to pick 50 jobs. Now, if you look at, say, DNL004, that's one job. And you see there within 004, there's rotation 1, rotation 2, rotation 3, rotation 4. That's basically just you start in 1 and then 3 months later 2, 3 months later 3, 3 months later 4. And that isn't 4 jobs, that's one job. So you are required to put down 50 of these quads of jobs, and they'll represent your rotations, that like whichever job you end up getting assigned will be the rotations you have an intern year. And this PDF is quite cool because you can see the different specialties. Usually it's 2 medical, 2 surgical, and you can see which consultants are on them. And I suppose the thing people always want to know is like how you get assigned to the given rotation depending on, your ranking. So obviously within your list, it's similar to CAO in that, 1 to 50, 1 is your top preference and obviously going down. But the way you actually get assigned to it versus other people is based on your class ranking. And literally what they do is in your finals, and you get this information.
right.
You'll be ranked. Like let's say there's 100 people in your class. You'll be ranked. You'll know you're number 3 or you'll know you're number 50. And from there, what they do is like, let's say me and you both graduated and you're ranked 50 and I'm ranked 51. Then right. If we both have the same job in rank 1, you'll get it because you're one class rank ahead of me. Now that actually gets extrapolated out to the whole country. So right. Every single medical student within their class has class ranking. So let's say I'm ranked 10 in Limerick and you're ranked 12 in RCSI, I'll get the job ahead of you.
Right. Okay.
Does that make sense? And yeah. In the unlikely event that I happen to be rank 1 in Limerick, which by the way, I'm not, and you're, let's say, rank 1 in Galway, at that point, as far as I know, random selection is applied.
Okay.
So, but that's essentially how they work.
Okay. Wow. That's crazy. Wow. That's kind of mad as well, because I guess like the schools have kind of vary in how many students they have as well, right? And especially if I think about it, like some of the schools like UCD have a grad program that feeds into their undergrad numbers as well, right? So every year they're going to have huge numbers of ranks. That's mad.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. To be fair, I think maybe I have it slightly wrong, and it's your class ranking fits you into a percentile on the overall bell curve,
right?
Which probably would make a bit more sense. But I think in general, it's basically to do with gross rankings. But yeah, like it probably gets adjusted slightly by the mathematicians in some way to make it
right
to make it scalable. Because obviously, if there's what's in Cork, it's like 40 students or something. Like, it's a low number. But if you're ranked 20 in a class of 40, it's not fair if you're beating someone who's ranked 50 in a class of 400.
Yeah, exactly. It must be. But I wonder as well.
Yeah,
no, just to clarify, actually, as well, I assume that this rank incorporates everyone in your year, irrespective of whether they choose to stay in Ireland or not, right? So, like, the way we have, for example, Limerick has a lot of Canadians who go back to Canada, but they're still given a rank, right?
Absolutely. And you've hit on a somewhat controversial note there.
Really?
Yeah, because it kind of skews the numbers a little bit, because if you have a class with a lot of internationals, it means a lot of your top ranks, or like, let's say, medium to top ranks, especially if they've been like sweating USMLEs and stuff,
Yeah.
might end up not being included. So it might be advantageous if you're planning on going into the Irish system to be in a class with a lot of people who are planning on going to the States, because they will.
Right. Oh, just to clarify as well, another clarification was because I know I had thought of this before, but so you said about random allocation. So essentially, there's no other criteria. Like I know, for example, again, if you go to the US or you go to Canada and stuff like that, and you're applying to residencies, they like look at so many different things like observerships and things like that, and I did different extracurricular, all that kind of things. So essentially, for the purpose of getting a place at intern or getting an internship in Ireland, the only criteria is your rank in your class, and then if it comes face to face, it's probably random selection. That's it.
It's nothing else. It's
Right.
completely the numbers.
Right.
And I think that probably is in some part at least to do with how small Ireland is as a country, and how many families there are in medicine in Ireland, because it kind of takes away the kind of propensity for maybe nepotism to get involved. So I actually do agree with it. If Ireland was the size of America, maybe it wouldn't be a great system, but I actually do think it is probably the fairest way to do it.
Yeah, yeah. And also, yeah, interestingly, I guess like you really just have to look at like when you were looking at your like deciding on your 50, were you really going after like did you prioritize like location first and then order in terms of where like what your specialty was, or were you putting like all of your specialty, or was it kind of a mix?
Yeah, it's a tough one, and it definitely varies from person to person. Like there's some people who are like, I want Tala, and that's it. So
Yeah,
all their 50 are just Tala.
yeah,
And then there's other people who are like, I want pediatrics. So they have all the peds jobs, regardless of where they are. It's
yeah.
just a personal preference. Me personally, I was kind of like, I want Dublin.
Okay.
Not like Dublin or bus, but like I was kind of like, I do have a preference for Dublin.
Yeah.
And then within that, I rank peds jobs first. By the way, peds jobs are the most competitive jobs.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Everyone I know in a peds job was like top 10 in their class, if not
Oh,
top
wow.
five, if not
Oh,
ranked one.
yeah. Oh my days.
So yeah, but there's very few peds jobs that then people kind of go for them.
Right.
But yeah, the job, I suppose, yeah, it's just kind of personal preference. But I mean, the best way to do it when you're actually doing, because that PDF, believe me, it's probably hard to show it on the video, but that
Yeah.
PDF is just so overwhelming. Like
Yeah.
it almost gets to the point, especially with 50. Some people picking CAO, it's like God, picking 10 or 8 or however many it is like wow, it's a hard choice. Like 50, it kind of gets to the point like after you're top 10, you're kind of like, oh yeah, just throw that job in, throw that job
Yeah.
in.
And the thing is, like, as you say, like it is so random, but I assume some people could just get very unlucky and choose all of the like all of the rotations that are or all of the jobs that happen to be then chosen or also highly regarded by a lot of high ranked students, and then they end up with, as you say, they may end
Mm.
up down in their 20 choices, surely,
Yeah, it's and yeah, that's a really good point, because it's different from CAO in that in CAO a rough estimate of how competitive what you're applying to is.
Mhm.
If you're going like, oh, medicine undergrad, it's like serious points. But if you're
Yeah.
putting down like, I don't know, jam making or something, it's
Yeah.
probably not as competitive.
Yeah.
The thing is, you actually have no idea how competitive any given job you're putting down is, other than just intuition.
Yeah.
Like yeah, probably like pediatrics in Temple Street
Mm.
is probably, you could guess you'd need a decent ranking for. But
Yeah.
then like there's other ones that would surprise you, like
Yeah.
that sound like God, you'd never get into that, and they're quite accessible.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I guess if I can jump into then, so in your case, you ended up in Beaumont. So what are your and it's 4 rotations as we saw with the document, right? So it's 4 sets of 3 months. And are all 4 of your rotations in Beaumont? I know some of them aren't all the one hospital, right?
Yeah, some hospitals have splits. Thankfully, Beaumont tends not to. So all mine are in Beaumont. And yeah, mine are. I started on colorectal surgery, and then went to ear, nose, throat, which I'm just finishing up now. And then I'll be on hematology after Christmas, which is why I picked that rotation because I quite like hematology.
Okay.
And then finish up on medicine of the elderly.
And have you, by the way, just out of curiosity, of all the kind of interns that you maybe know or have spoken to in Beaumont, is it kind of a mix of med students from everywhere then, I guess, given how the system works? Or have you like found that there's a good few people from UL, or is there a kind of a general theme there?
So there is a team. I sent you another picture before
Oh
this,
yes.
and uh it's like a picture of Ireland, and it shows which hospitals are in which network.
Yeah.
Because depending on which hospital you're in, you will be in an intern network that is associated with one of the medical schools. So
Mm-hmm.
let's say Beaumont is in the Dublin Northeast network,
Yeah.
which is associated with RCSI. But let's say if you're in James's, that's associated with Trinity. If you're in Vincent's, that's associated with UCD. Uh, Cork is obviously associated with Cork. Limerick's associated with Limerick. But
Yeah.
yeah, and then there's the smaller hospitals within those kind of constituencies.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in one of them, you will get your like teaching in intern year, and kind of the coordinating of it all will be done through the respective college. So with that in mind, usually the hospitals associated with the medical schools will retain quite a lot of them. So let's say Beaumont is RCSI, predominantly the interns are RCSI in Beaumont.
Right. Yeah.
Probably like, yeah, I'd say maybe like 60 to 70% of them are RCSI. And
Okay.
then UL is quite represented. I think we're the second biggest, maybe 20%.
Right.
20%
Right.
is UL, and then there's very few others, to be fair. The odd Trinity,
Yeah.
the odd Galway. But like if you went to James's, you'd find a predominance of Trinity, and if you went to Vincent's, you'd find a predominance of UCD.
Right. And some of that I assume is time there, obviously in medical school, like they did their rotations there.
Correct. Yeah, they would have been medical students there.
Oh,
Um,
cheers.
nice cup of tea for you there.
Yeah, my God, the whole production has to shut down now from it. So they would have obviously the respective schools or the hospitals that they're in, they would have done like Beaumont, as you say. The RCSI students will have spent time there probably in their rotations in medical school as well. Anyway, so they're probably likely to prefer sticking with that, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And especially if they're a medical student on a service, and the particular like prof or something there was like kind of fond of them, then there's a good likelihood that they're going to try to put that job down.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense.
But I just thought of something that I probably should have touched on.
Oh yeah.
In with relation to selecting your 50 and getting them. And I was saying about class rankings and everything like that. Um, where your nationality and what way you entered medical school actually play into that hugely. I actually forgot to mention at the time, because I never really thought about it, because I was kind of like, if you're Irish and went through CAO, you're kind of in pot one, which is great, gives you
Right.
priority over everyone. It's so the way it works is basically anyone who has a European passport and got into medical school through CAO and studied in Ireland, they are in like pot one. So it doesn't matter what your ranking is. If you're in pot two versus someone in pot one, all the people in pot one will be sorted before they even look at pot two.
Right.
Does that make sense? And pot two is people with European passports who didn't enter through CAO.
Right. Okay.
So for example, and this is kind of where that situation comes up a lot. So there's a lot of people from North America in Irish medical school. So let's say your friend from Canada who studies in UL who happens to have an Italian passport.
Right.
But they didn't do exams that they didn't go through CAO. They entered through whatever crazy way they enter Irish medical school.
Yeah.
They're in pot 2.
Right.
And then pot 3 is someone who didn't do CAO and entered through the kind of other ways and doesn't have a European passport. So right. A Canadian with a Canadian passport essentially is what we're talking about.
Right.
And the way it works is if you're in category 1, everything is filled. And then they look at category 2, everything is filled. And then they look at category 3, everything is filled. Right. Which is kind of unfair. If you could be the worst medical, like you could be the worst exam scores in Ireland.
Yeah.
And the best exam score in Ireland in your medical school could be up against you for a spot. But if they're in the one pot down from you, you're beating them.
Wow.
So that's or you're getting the place ahead of them. So that's It's heavily weighted towards European CAOs.
That's really interesting, especially because I know there's been some like issues from what I'm aware. I know I was watching Ollie Burton, is a guy on YouTube that I watch a good bit, and he was talking a lot about the issues that the NHS has with like the other way, where they're swinging the other way, where they're not giving their own medical groups, like even UK based medical graduates, any preference over other people. So like they're graduating from UK medical schools, they're from the UK, and they're not even getting a spot off the bat because people are coming in. So that's mad though. That's really interesting. Yeah.
Look, there's a debate to be had about it because I mean, to be fair, most countries do prioritize their own nationals. Like say, I know in the American system, there's US IMGs and then there's non-US IMGs, and they have preference. So that's kind of how it works. But it's nice to be on the right side of that coin. But
absolutely. And I do actually brief in a little bit. I do actually want to talk about kind of working abroad from what you're aware of, because I'm definitely someone. I think you mentioned to me before about wanting to go to the US or Australia. I am in the process of trying to prep for USMLE Step 1 because I would love to go over there. If not straight away, then I would definitely love to do some training over there for sure. But just before we get there, a couple of questions on what sort of examinations do you have at the end of the intern year that you're aware of, or if any?
There aren't any.
No. Oh, really?
It's more of a continuous assessment model.
Okay.
So you'll get an assessment at each rotation. You're kind of like the consultant who's like over you will submit a report, which, to be fair, is it's not like something that's graded. It's more like a yes no.
Right.
And like unless you're absolutely terrible, like you're getting pushed through, or unless you're kind of like awkward to work with,
right?
Where your consultant doesn't like you because you're like you just like can't get along with anyone, or like that kind of thing. Maybe they might kind of like flag you on that, but like to put it in perspective, on my first rotation in colorectal, there's a large box on a big form that's like the equivalent of like an A4 page to write about the intern that the consultant's going to fill in, and my consultant filled in "good intern." That's the extent of the feedback I got. That should maybe give you a kind of an insight into how much people care about these things.
Yeah. Oh my days.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's maybe a good thing. I think some people are always thinking about like what's the next exam and this, that, and the other. So maybe nice to have a little bit of the pressure off for sure.
To get through intern year, it's those. So each of your 4 rotations, you'll have one of them, and then depending on your intern network, there'll be kind of things you've got to complete throughout the year to kind of be signed off by your intern network, and it's stuff like kind of the odd sim session. They might have like a presentation or two for you to do. There's some like BMJ, like British Medical Journal, like kind of
Yeah.
online kind of little modules. But to be honest, it's not something anyone stresses about. These are all kind of box ticking exercises.
Right. Right. Okay. Unreal. So then, from what you're aware of, because I know this is then kind of beyond where you're at the moment, but obviously looking towards how soon after your internship can you apply to specialty training? Or I guess, and I'm going to tie in with that question, so I know it's a lot, but when you kind of finish your intern year, so I know we're kind of, as you say, as Irish medical graduates from Irish medical schools are sort of somewhat guaranteed a position somewhere. Are you then guaranteed beyond that, or to your SHO, or what is the kind of process when you finish going forward that you're aware of?
So within the Irish system, like once you finish intern year, like you're signed off as an intern, and now you are eligible to apply for SHO jobs.
Right.
Now, SHO jobs can be either standalone positions or ones associated with a training scheme.
Okay.
So a standalone position would be like one that's just like, oh, we need an SHO for colorectal team in Tullamore Hospital.
Yeah.
6 months duration, and you apply and you do it, and that's kind of it. It's just right. It's kind of like it's almost like a locum. You know what I mean? It's kind of
yeah.
It's just kind of there's no kind of like overt progression in it. It's just kind of like you do your time and you get the experience and etc. But once you're finished, you're just looking for another job then.
Yeah.
The training scheme positions of SHO are different. So like let's say you're an intern, you say, oh, you know what, I know I want to do surgery. I know for a fact I want to do surgery. You can apply to, I think it's called CST or something. Like, I'm not applying in the Irish medical system, so I don't really know the kind of intricacies of it.
Yeah.
But it's like the core surgical training of the CST. Yeah, it's like core surgical training, right? And if you that's something you have to interview for and like apply for to. I actually don't even know who you apply to it. I probably should know, but I just have never even thought about doing it. So, but let's say you apply to it, and then you have to do interviews, and you have to submit like kind of full CV type stuff with references, etc.
Yeah.
And then from there, if you're successful, they might say, okay, yes, we'll accept you onto the scheme. And from there, it's like you are like, say for example, on my first rotation, the SHO on there was on the surgical scheme. So he is an SHO who is progressing through the steps of training as a surgeon in Ireland.
Yes, got you.
So it's more versus a standalone position. There's an emphasis on teaching and progression versus just coming in and doing the job.
Got you. Yeah. Okay, that's really helpful. And again, probably especially for someone like me looking very far down the line, to be honest. But I say that. But anyway, so then kind of talking more about you then. So are you currently applying to the US? Is that right?
So I'm gonna go to Australia next year, and then I'm going to hopefully go to the US the year after. But I've done USMLE step 2, but I've just been sleeping on doing step 1. So I need to.
Oh yeah. So that's the thing.
I need to get the finger in and do that.
I didn't appreciate that you can do them in any order. That's right. Well, the first 2 you can, right? And then you have to have the first 2 to do 3.
Yeah, and to be honest, a lot of residency programs don't even require you to have step 3. Like, you eventually need to do it, but you can get on and be over there working without doing step 3.
Okay, and you have step 2 done.
Yeah, I did. So my kind of thing of it, I was studying for step 1 when I was at around your stage in the second year, and then they announced it was going to pass fail. So I kind of was like, okay, I might wait until it's pass fail. So in view of that, it went to pass fail, and at that stage I was in 3rd year, 4th year, which is more clinical based, which is more probably there's more overlap in step 2 with your clinical years of medical school, so I just thought it made more sense to do it first.
Okay, yeah, got you.
But there's a caveat on that. I had already studied for USMLE Step 1 when I decided to do that. I wouldn't recommend anyone doing Step 2 first if you haven't studied for Step 1, because you'll get these questions about, like, histology showed orphan Annie eyes, and
Right.
if you don't know that's associated with papillary thyroid cancer, you're not getting the question right.
Yeah. That's
But
fair.
I'm not saying I went in as some sort of guru on Step 1, but I knew the kind of like, I knew the high yieldish kind of like buzzwordy stuff that without it would be very, very difficult to do Step 2 first.
Right. Okay. I know what you mean. That's I'm in the same boat where I say same, but like I'm obviously trying to prep for Step 1. I definitely found that I think the first semester of second year got away from me a little bit in terms of the Step 1 stuff. So I definitely need to pick that up second semester, because of course I don't know if you guys had that. We have a mock in March that you have to pass in order to be allowed to sit Step 1. To be approved by the school. So
the Kaplan one, isn't it?
Yeah, so I kind of feel like I have a lot of work to do in the next couple of months for that. But so I guess, yeah, and this kind of I think the last few questions that I had kind of tie in with what we're talking about at the moment, which is kind of with your medical degree kind of now behind you, what advice do you have for current and future medical students in general? And also anything maybe in particular to UL students. I don't know if there is anything.
General advice. The main thing I would give is, like, don't stress. I think there's a lot of unnecessary stress in medical school, and it's like one of those things. People in it, they hear people saying this, been through it, and they go, oh. And they stress anyway. They kind of like listen to it and they say, yeah, but it's not really true. It is true. No one cares about. No one rates anything that happened in medical school once you graduate. Like, no one goes, oh, well, Harry's a shit intern because in third year he gave an embarrassing answer on ward round when he got asked something.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of feeling like your reputation depends on everything in medical school, but like no one thinks about any of that when you start working. The dynamic changes. And the other side of it is, and it's very hard to believe this as a medical student, I didn't believe it, is like the class ranking you have does not matter. Like no one knows or cares what anyone's class ranking is. I'll give you an anecdotal example.
Yeah.
There's someone I work with who, like, I'm not going to give any names or anything. There's someone I work with who I know did very well from a class ranking point of view.
Yeah.
But wouldn't be, someone who springs to mind when you're trying to think of who would be a great intern.
Right. Yeah.
Who would be a great doctor.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And on the flip side of that, there are also, maybe individuals who might have struggled from a class ranking point of view, who are some of the best doctors and the best interns.
Yeah.
And I suppose the point is that, like, genuinely no one cares. Like, your consultant isn't going to ask you what your class ranking was, and if you told him, he wouldn't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, look, do the best you can do. You should do that in anything. But there's people, like, losing weight in final year because they're so worried about class ranking and stuff. And it's not as important as you think.
Yeah. That's such, I feel like that's such good advice. Like, we were even talking, just having done our exams here now this set, and we were talking about how, like, a lot of people were coming out saying, like, oh, like, a lot of us were just saying, I just want to hopefully have gotten through them and passed, because at the end of the day, what a lot of us said was, like, as you've talked about, it's not necessarily going to define you in the first place as to how you're going to be as a doctor. But second of all, we said, like, we got examined on very specific stuff, some of which we've been taught really well, some of which we hadn't. And, like, some of it was like very look at the draw type stuff. I remember like, you know, we had a couple of random questions that felt like they were so left field, and they weren't really that important in the grand scheme of things. And so like some people did well on them because they happened to know it, and some people didn't. And we said like at the end of the day, because we're examined on such specific things, or like our anatomy spotter had 25 images, but there's so much more to anatomy than 25 images, that like it doesn't mean that you're going to be better or worse in the long run. So like we can't, you know what I mean? And so we can't have that kind of idea that all those grades are everything going forward, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 100%. And just I suppose following on from what I said there, is like something you'll find people saying in final year when they're talking about applying to intern year and they're worrying about class rankings. They'll say, "Oh, but I just really want Dublin. I just really want Dublin." Yeah. And then you'll hear people plucking numbers out of the sky saying, "Oh, like, well, to get Dublin, you need to be in the top kind of like third of your class or X, Y, Z." You don't. Right. I'll say right now, anyone, even if you're the last rank in your class, even if you're like in James's 140, if you're a 140 out of 140,
yeah,
you can get Dublin. And the reason I know that is because there's people in pot 2 who get Dublin.
Right.
Okay, so
right. Yeah.
Does that make sense? So
yeah,
people, well, you need, I don't know where they get the numbers from.
Yeah.
You don't. You absolutely do not.
That's good. Yeah, that's very good to know, actually, because
it just depends on the jobs you apply for, you know?
Yeah. And I do know a lot of people, like I remember our year talking about how when we went into UL, like a lot of people had anticipated, because the GAMSAT scores kind of like hiked a little bit. So a lot of people who expected to be in Dublin for their med school ended up in UL and have subsequently said like, "Oh, I definitely want to go back to Dublin, definitely want to go back to Dublin." So there's definitely a lot of talk like that. But as you said,
yeah, and on that note, I'll alleviate some. I haven't said it, but it's kind of been implied. But I'll just clarify it. The medical school you went to does not increase the likelihood of you getting placed in that intern network. Going to RCSI does not increase your chances. Doesn't increase your you won't get a place in Beaumont just because you went to RCSI. It's got nothing to do with that. But a lot of people think that, like, "Oh, I'll never get into the Trinity network because I went to Galway." It's irrelevant.
Okay, that's, and again, another thing that's so good to know, because in my head, even coming into school and like even through first year, like in my head, I had it for whatever reason, just because I didn't know any other information or I wasn't given any other information, was like, oh, well, if they've trained up there and they've spoken to those consultants and they've good rapport, they'll be able to, you know what I mean? Because I didn't even know if there were particular interviews or things that happened. So I thought, oh, they'll definitely have the advantage. Like, oh, it'll be so hard to go to Dublin for that reason. Because like I'm, going to UL, so surely I've no shot at going up to Dublin, and vice versa. That's crazy. Yeah,
you're all guaranteed Dublin.
Yeah.
just what I would recommend if anyone is worried about, like, anyone who's kind of like, let's say on the kind of like lower end of their class rankings, like, put down the job you want, but maybe in your last 10 or 20 you can put down ones that, like, you will see on that list there are ones where you're like, "Oh, that's not a job that's probably too competitive." Like, I don't know, like a medicine of the elderly split with like Dundalk or something, like Dundalk Dublin or something.
Right. Yeah.
That's going to be more. That's not going to be as competitive as like emergency medicine in St. James's.
Yeah. Fair. Yeah.
No, but yeah, look, if you apply smart, everyone can get them.
Yeah. And a final question then. So, like, you're obviously in the job now, you're cracking on. How have you found, just out of curiosity, because I know a lot goes around like in the media and everything else about like either doctors leaving or like to go elsewhere, or like, and I know that obviously we've just talked about planning to do that, etc. But like, how have you found the job itself in terms of like have you felt overworked? Have you felt like overwhelmed by the job at all, or how has that transition been?
It's a tough question to answer and promote enthusiasm. It is quite shit in terms of the kind of relentless nature of it.
Right.
when you're in it, it is actually does take a toll on you.
Yeah.
Definitely does for me. It's just relentless. It's like, if you can imagine, like, if you've ever kind of had a really busy week, if you've ever had a job or something before, it's like people have busy weeks in their life, but not back to back to back to back to back to back to back. And
Right.
it just never ever stops.
Yeah.
And like it does depend on the team you work on. Some services are busier than others. Like when I was on colorectal, I was, easily hitting 70 hours a week.
70, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
easily hitting
Wow.
70 hours a week. And on ENT, which is also surgical. By the way, surgical hours are always way more than medical. But
Right.
ENT is like, more like 55.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
so yeah, it's just quite relentless, and it's quite thankless as well in many ways.
Really?
Like that does depend on the team you're on now, but there's plenty of times you'll stay late, you'll go above and beyond, and
Yeah.
it like won't even be mentioned. But I suppose there's something in that probably prepares you and is kind of like character building a little bit.
Yeah.
But like, don't expect your consultant to be shaking your hand for sorting out your patients. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. That's mad.
some might, but I haven't met them yet.
Yeah. And the greedy man in me has to know, are you paid for all that overtime that you've been doing?
Yeah.
You are. Okay.
Well,
Not that I'm saying that justifies the amount of errors or anything.
you are paid for it. Like, but now, to be fair, hospital HRs across the country, I know from the news, and also Beaumont's one. Um, uh, maybe edit out me name dropping Beaumont,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure people will know that I'm talking about Beaumont because it's where I work.
Yeah.
But actually, no. To be fair, like, I'm not saying anything that isn't true.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there have been multiple incidents of, like, you know more like clerical errors with regard to hours versus like, we're not paying you your overtime. Like, they'll pay you anything that they like know you work. But I know loads of people who like they might do like 2 days on a weekend, and then
Yeah.
suddenly they get their pay slip and they just weren't paid for them. And they have to,
Right.
it's like the type of thing where, like, if you check every pay slip and then be like, oh wait, I didn't, and then email
Yeah.
HR, you always get the money. But
Yeah.
if you're kind of a bit like more slapdash about it and just kind of like, oh, I'm sure they paid me well, like, there probably
Yeah.
is mistakes in
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, like, and like, to be fair, like, you do get paid well for it. Like, yeah, like, after tax on a surgical job, like, per month, you're probably looking at like between like 4 and 5 grand per
Okay.
month.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's working like 70 hours a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably some call on the weekends, some overtime on Sunday, like,
Yeah.
blah blah blah, blah. So yeah, you're talking probably like, yeah, probably between 4 and 5 grand a month. Some people now who are like, you can actually make, like, if you were really 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 hated your life, you could make a lot of money on intern year. Like, if
Yeah.
like when you start, there'll be people giving away their shifts because some people are scared to work
Right.
on call, especially. So you'll get, like, if I wanted to pick up Saturday and Sunday next weekend, I could easily do it. I just
Really.
go in the group chat and be like, does anyone want me to take the Saturday and Sunday? And there'd be 10 people messaging me.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
and like, you could do, if you did that every week and took kind of extended the nights and stuff, like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say if you really were trying to set a record, you could make like 100
Yeah.
grand in intern year.
Wow. Just like, yeah, give up the social life and have a
Oh,
go.
you'd need to give up your mental health as well. Like,
Yeah.
like, you'd be broke. There's one or two kind of there's one or two individuals, I think, in every hospital who are like notorious for taking up shifts. I don't know how they do it.
Oh my days.
Yeah.
That's unreal.
On that note, I'm probably rambling a bit, but I keep coming up with things to say that I
No, it's
think
great,
would
honestly.
would be beneficial.
Yeah.
Um, one thing when you do start working, that's that's quite a difficult thing to wrap your head around. Is like your day job as an intern is very clerical, very administrative. It's kind of like, you round at your team and you're booking scans, you're kind of following up on consults, you're trying to figure out like what medication they're really on, you're calling GP. It's all like a lot of it is very like non-medical
Right.
in many ways, or discharge letters, or sitting at a
Right.
computer on the phone, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that is the majority of your job, and that's part of why I said it. Like it can be a bit draining sometimes, because it's like you're going in and you're there all day, and it's like you don't really feel like you're doctor. You kind of
Right.
you feel like you're just doing stuff on a computer. But
Yeah.
the flip side of that, like, so you're essentially not a doctor during the day, and then the flip side of that is when you're on call, like you're essentially a consultant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, like there's no limit to there's no clinical scenario you can imagine that you won't be called to on call.
Really.
It's not like they're like, oh geez, this patient's really bad, let's call like the consultant.
Yeah.
No, it's like they'll like the way it works on the ward is the patient's going off big time. The nurses notice it. They call the intern. You come, deal with it. Then from there, if you think you can't deal with it, you call the reg. And if the reg can't deal with it, he'll call the consultant. But there's that chain of events happens every time. And especially if it's something really, really acute, like say like an upper GI bleed,
Yeah.
or like a PV bleed or something.
Yeah.
Which, like, I've never been called to a PV bleed, but I can't imagine. I can't imagine anything worse.
Yeah.
But
And surely, like, does it ever happen that, like, if someone was called, like, surely, I don't know, if someone called, or like the nurse called and said, as you say, it's a PV bleed, or it's something where, like, like, are you expected to go in and like try and figure things out, or could you realistically say, like, I definitely can't do anything about that, if you know that that's what that is, and immediately call your reg? Or is that just like you can't really do that, or does that depend on the scenario?
I don't think you could say. I don't think you could say, "Oh, geez, I don't know."
Yeah.
Call someone else. You could say, like, you'd definitely be justified. Let's say you got called by a nurse and they said, "Oh, very large volume PV bleed in a third trimester, 25-year-old pregnant woman."
Right.
I think it would be entirely reasonable at that point to say, "Okay, I'm on the way. I think we should call straight away for senior help. Can you call the obsgyn consultant, or reg on call,
Right.
and ask them to come as well? I'm heading there now, but
Yeah.
most likely you'll be the first person on the scene."
Right.
And being 100% serious, there is scary things you get called to.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
There
Yeah. Yeah.
there is scary things you get called to, and there are things you get called to that no matter how good you are, there's like really no way you're going to be able to like manage fully,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
especially at the start, it is quite scary.
I can only
And
imagine.
that's why you get a lot of people trying to give away shifts.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but you do get used to it. But
Yeah.
I suppose it's just strange, because your day-to-day work is like very like clerical, and then they go, "Oh, by the way, Harry, you're on Saturday during the day," and you go, "Oh, grand, yeah," and then you
Yeah.
roll in, and next thing you're in 5 minutes, and they call you and they say, "Oh, Harry, there's a guy here. His blood pressure is 260 on 220, and his vision's blurred." And
Mm.
then you're like, "Ooh, that sounds very bad." And then when you're on the way there, they go, "Yeah, there's a guy having a ST elevation, myocardial infarction over here on the ward. He's very short of breath. Heart rate is 170." You
Oh my
know what I
God.
mean? And you
Yeah.
get to two at once,
Yeah.
and then you're just like, so it is kind of stressful. I'm not trying to put people off.
No,
I'm
yeah,
just saying
it's a reality that's like nice to hear about, really. Because I think everyone
yeah.
has heard. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think anyone is like oblivious or to the idea that, like, you know, it's stressful and things may happen. But I think context like you're giving is just really nice to kind of understand what people mean, because I think people know it's crazy, like that it can be a crazy and a really, really, really busy job. But I don't think people, myself included, you know, without you, people like yourself kind of talking about it, really understand what that means. Like you say, people getting like you're clerical during the day, and then all of a sudden, bang, here's two patients that are acutely ill, deal with it. Like, yeah, I know what you mean. Mad.
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. But I suppose I'll kind of round that point off with a positive, is that there is huge level of satisfaction when you finish call or finish night and you got through it, and you know you didn't make any major blunders and you didn't kill anyone. It is nice. It's a nice feeling to know that you got through that, and I don't know if it makes it worthwhile because it's very stressful, but it definitely offsets. It definitely offsets some of that stress, and it definitely makes you feel very accomplished. You know, when you, especially if you've had a tricky patient who you manage well, you know, you kind of you'll kind of be like, I'm proud of myself for doing that, and there is a lot of satisfaction that comes with that.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's kind of that's the part you should focus on.
That's unreal. It's been absolutely great. First of all, yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Oscar. That's been so helpful, and I'm actually really excited to put this out because, like, I know so many people that would love to hear this information, because even I have learned. Like, I know it's really good when I've learned so much from something anyway. So it's great to be able to kind of have contacts like yourself to chat about this. And yeah, so thanks a million for coming on. Really appreciate it. And what was I going to say to you? Yeah, for anyone that doesn't know, I was talking to Oscar before we started this video, and basically the fourth years last year won Med Cup are really, really important. I know the World Cup has just happened. This is probably equally as important as far as UL Med is concerned,
if not more important.
And the cup is just there, and we've got Med Cup starting in February, and I'm gonna have to get it back often, but it might be more of a struggle by the looks of things. But yeah, listen, yeah, I'll wrap the video up there, guys. So thanks a million for watching. If you've any other questions that you would like either myself or Oscar or anyone else that we can hopefully try and answer for you, as always, please leave them down in the comments. Please subscribe to the channel. It's been steadily growing to over 300 subscribers recently. So yeah, really, really appreciate the support, guys. And hopefully this has been an entertaining video for you. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.